Hello, hello, and welcome to the very first episode of NPC Next Portable Console in 2025. My name, as always, is Brendan Bigley. I'm here, of course, with Federico Vitici. Hello, Federico.
Hello, Brendon. Your name, as always, hasn't changed. So you're still Brendan Bigley in 2025.
I'm still Brendan Bigley. Yeah. Ask me again in a couple months. No, it'll still be Brendan Bigley, I think.
Yeah, you're still.
I hope so.
Yeah. Happy New Year.
We'll say Happy New Year to you, too. And I'm also here with John Voorhees.
Yes, today I am, in fact, John Voorhees, and I'll probably be John Voorhees tomorrow as well, but you never know about Monday, so we'll see. It's good to see
by
you
the
guys.
time this episode launches, who knows? Something may have changed. Welcome back, guys. Glad to be here.
You two were, we should address it right away.
Mm-hmm.
You two have been together in Las Vegas for the past few days, and this episode is going to be pretty much entirely about CES 2025.
Yeah.
The things you saw, the things you touched and tested, the things John put in his ears. This is a whole thing we need to get into at some point.
This has nothing to do with NPC that I put things in my ears. Brendan wasn't there for that part.
I'm still thinking about.
John, what did you get up to while I was gone?
I'm still thinking about it. It's very bad. So we have obviously for the next few weeks a bunch of topics to get to. But today, we just wanted to talk about CES and all the sort of NPC-related announcements and the things you guys have seen. So first of all, I just want to ask you, up front, how was it? Did you have a good time?
I'll let you go first, John.
I loved it. I actually really loved it. I loved it even more because the first couple of days, I thought I had made a mistake by going to Las Vegas. Because when Brendon and I got there, the first event we went to was called Unveiled, which was like a little mini version of CES, which was a reception, with hors d'oeuvres and drinks and a very small subset of the stuff that was being shown off at CES. And there wasn't a single thing related to gaming anywhere, really. So there was that. And then the next day we listened to a bunch of CEOs tell us about how AI was going to save our lives. And there wasn't a lot going on in terms of either gaming or anything else tech related until we started walking the show floor. And the show floor is where things really took off. And we saw some really cool gadgets, a lot of gaming stuff. And we did that all day Tuesday. We walked over 8 miles that day, seeing all kinds of stuff. It was really, I was really happy with it, other than the fact that the crowds are a little bit much to contend with. But the show overall was a success, I think.
Yeah, it's weird because I feel like Vegas is both the best and worst place for that convention to be simultaneously. Yeah. Worst because you would think, this is the thing, when people asked me all day yesterday, oh, how was Vegas? I'm like, famously, Las Vegas is a straight line. The Vegas Strip is a straight line, right? All of the hotels and casinos are on one straight line. You cannot walk in a straight line. The infrastructure of Vegas is built for cars and not for people at all. So you're supposed to be traveling between all these different hotels and convention centers, which are all on that straight line. But it takes an hour to walk half a block for some reason. It's so weird.
Yeah, the thing that happened to me after you left, Brendon, was I had to get from the hotel we stayed at to the Venetian, which is basically a mile away. It took an hour and a half because of the traffic getting into the Venetian. Hour and a half.
Oh, so wild.
And it's not like you can just walk it because it's not that easy to walk in Las Vegas.
Walking from one place to another in Vegas requires going into and out of hotels, which is how you know they messed up. Yeah.
Yes.
That is the very first day when we tried to go to Unveiled and another thing called Tech Trends, which was two random people pronouncing NVIDIA wrong over and over again and talking about how Gen Z was coming up. We were trying to get there.
How can you pronounce NVIDIA wrong?
NVIDIA is what they kept saying.
NVIDIA?
Yeah, for some reason. So CES is run by a company called CTE, and everyone that we heard from at CTE all said NVIDIA. Even before the NVIDIA press conference, before their keynote.
When they're introducing the guy.
They were introducing the guy, and they came out and they were like, the CEO of NVIDIA. And then he came out and immediately was like, hello, welcome to the NVIDIA keynote at CES 2025.
Wow. Okay.
It's weird. It was really messing with me.
You were saying.
Anyway. Yeah. Anyway, just the process of walking back and forth. We had to walk into, there's that big pyramid one, the Luxor. To get to where Unveiled was, we needed to go into the Luxor and then out of the Luxor to get to the other hotel where those press conferences were.
And there are no straight lines in these hotels because they're designed to snake you through the casino so you'll spend your money. I mean, really, everything about Las Vegas is designed to extract as much money out of you as it possibly can.
Which is why it's also the perfect place for CES, because so much of CES and so many of the gadgets you see are like Sky Mall, Brookstone, Sharper Image equivalent, like maybe like they're so close to being grifts, like they're so close to being gadgets that you would never ever need, that they just kind of exist as a way to siphon money from your pocket. And that's what Vegas is, baby. Like in some ways it's the perfect marriage of a convention and a city, and in other ways it's like the infrastructure is so bad that they can't handle the amount of stuff that's happening there. They can't withhold the amount of grifts happening simultaneously. I guess that feeds into, I don't know if I would go back, is my answer to your question, Federico. I think like the experience of being in Vegas, I think was pretty off-putting. CES, the show floor specifically, was awesome. I think you're right, John. Like those first 2 days, the media days, if you're a person who's in media at all, like just don't do it for the most part. Unless you have like actual behind closed doors meetings with companies, it is not worth it going to those like pre-media days. Because all that stuff is just available through press releases anyway. Yeah. So you don't need to actually be there. The actual important thing is like going to the show floor, meeting people face to face, having them say, this is my favorite thing about any convention, but like talking to a person and saying like, what did you build? Why are you excited about it? Why should I be excited about it? Like those conversations are really fruitful and really interesting. It's why I love going to PAX East. It's probably my favorite video game conference that I go to every year. Because you get to talk to like an indie developer who's been building a game for 5 years, and they're like, this is the most important thing in my life. Aren't you also excited about it? And I'm like, yes, I am. I am excited to hear other people's passion for things. And that's what the show floor of CES is about for the most part. Every once in a while, somebody's like, we built a flying car. And you're like, no, you didn't. You didn't build a flying car. But sometimes you talk to somebody, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, but like sometimes you talk to somebody who's like, I was on spring break and I built this weird controller. I'm excited to release it to the world at a certain point. And that's fun,
Okay. That's a great explanation. So tell me about now sort of going back to the more strictly gaming related angle. What were some of the takeaways that you've seen from a gaming perspective on the show floor?
I think the surprising thing for me was how few handheld manufacturers were actually there. I mean, the big companies were there, Lenovo, MSI, those companies were there. But the Anbernics of the world, they weren't there. Neo wasn't there. Ian Odin wasn't there. There's a bunch of companies that weren't there. The smaller Chinese manufacturers, typically, although there are lots of companies from China there, just weren't handheld manufacturers. So that was a little surprising, I guess. But in terms of the actual takeaways of what was there, it was that I think we're going to start seeing the next turn of handheld gaming a little sooner than maybe we thought. It seemed as though when we left, particularly the AMD conference, that we're going to start seeing some of this stuff maybe by the end of 2025 instead of 2026.
Yeah. I think one of the big takeaways for me, so AMD's press conference in particular, they were being a little bit cagey about what some of those processors can do, but we have officially moved out of the Z1 line of processors, which is what powered a lot of the early PC handhelds, like the ROG Ally. The original one used the Z1 chip, and then the Z1 Extreme eventually. Now the Ally X also uses the Z1 Extreme. And we're now in the Z2 era, which, John and I recorded a video from Vegas that you can go watch also on this YouTube channel, on the Mac Stories YouTube channel. And that video we kind of talked about, and you brought up, John, like the Z2 chip technically is more power efficient, but has a higher TDP. So there are like weird trade-offs where you're getting better power efficiency, but for higher end games and not lower end games, which I think is like, for a lot of people who own gaming PCs and something like the Steam Deck, the reason I have the Steam Deck is to be playing lower fidelity games, kind of more like indie games at a lower TDP handheld, right? They want to be playing like Stardew Valley for 15 hours on that thing. And weirdly, these new AMD chips are like kind of worse at that. That said, the top line of that level of chip is the Z2 Extreme, and that I think is probably going to be the chip we see in a lot of these like version 2.0 of these handhelds, like that first wave of handhelds. I mean, John, we saw the Lenovo Legion Go 2, for example, like that, a prototype of the Lenovo Legion Go 2, and it was running Spider-Man, I think Miles Morales, and that thing is going to have the Z2 in it, or the Z2 Extreme in it when it comes out. Like that is the chip that Lenovo is like, this is the one we're banking on being the next generation chip. What's fascinating though is we also have a company, like MSI, making the MSI Claw AI 8 Plus, I think is the full name of it, which has the most recent Intel chip in it. And it's interesting seeing the huge performance leap that chip is providing in a lot of ways. And I don't know, it feels like we're in this place where either things could pop off in a big way by the end of 2025, or alternatively, this chip lineup isn't actually the thing we were waiting for, and it might even take another year. So I think it really is weird, but it kind of all hinges on the Z2 Extreme in particular. Like the Z2 Extreme chip, depending on what the benchmarks look like and like how it actually performs and how big of a battery they can put in the Legion Go 2, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When that thing comes out, that will tell us if we're in the next generation of these things or not in a big way.
Yeah, the real world performance of these chips is really going to make a big difference. I mean, the funny thing is we also saw the Legion Go S that had Steam installed on it, but no games. So we didn't actually play any games on that one. I did get a chance to play the MSI Claw AI 8 on Tuesday. I got to hold that and play around with it a little bit and play a little Sonic, and it felt pretty good. I mean, it's actually, the design is, it's the first time I've ever held an MSI Claw. The design was really nice, and it's not too heavy. The screen was really nice, and at least playing Sonic, it was a really good experience.
Yeah, so I just wanted to contextualize the AMD chips a little bit more. So the Z2 Extreme at the very top of the line. So we're seeing this, and which is why it sort of feels like a sort of like stopgap in a way, because it is combining essentially Zen 3 and Zen 5 CPU cores, and it's still using RDNA 3.5 graphics.
Right.
So RDNA 4, it's happening on desktop. It's still not happening on mobile devices.
Right.
So we're still using RDNA 3.5. It's got 16 GPU cores, up from 12 from the Z1 Extreme. The Z2, the vanilla Z2, is basically the Z1 Extreme with a new name.
Yeah.
And pretty much like RDNA 3 graphics, same CPU cores, same GPU cores. It's now called the Z2. Then there's what I think is interesting is the Z2 Go, which is we're gonna talk about the Legion Go S in a minute. But the Z2 Go, it's got fewer CPU cores than the old Z1. It runs just like the original Steam Deck on RDNA 2 graphics. So that's obviously a step below even the first gen ROG Ally. But it comes with 12 GPU cores compared to the Steam Deck or the Z1 with 4 GPU cores. So you got pretty much like it's the same old graphical architecture, but with how many 3 times the GPU cores, which
it's really strange. And then you throw into the mix those minimum TDPs, which are at 15 watts, and it's a strange mix.
It's a strange mix because unlike the Steam Deck, which can go all the way down to 4 watts TDP, which is what Brendon just said, like you can play Stardew Valley and less graphical intensive games for like 12 hours, and you're still gonna have power in your Steam Deck because you go all the way down to 4 watts. This needs to stay at a minimum at 15 watts, which means heat, which means fan noise, which means battery doesn't last as long. So
hypothetically, having SteamOS on there could offset some of the battery draw a little bit, because Windows is just a more processor intensive software, but still, it's weird.
Electricity is gonna draw power, which is gonna generate heat, which is gonna make the fans spin.
And like the Legion Go S is just a smaller device. I assume that there's a smaller battery in there. I don't know that we know the specs on the battery yet, but
I think we do, because you can pre-order it now at this point.
Isn't it 55 watt-hour battery, I think?
Okay.
I think it's a 55. But yeah, so an interesting if only slightly confusing lineup by AMD, but still, that Z2 Extreme, like when it launches in a Legion Go 2 or even potentially an ROG Ally 2 at some point, I don't know. I think it's gonna be very nice to be able to play Elden Ring or a Dragon's Dogma or Resident Evil on Windows with much better performance than a Z1 Extreme.
Let me hit you with a little side alley that we can traverse down a little bit before we take a quick break. But one of the things I found interesting about the AMD presentation is, as I was saying, they're being a little bit like cagey or maybe even purposefully fluid about how they were describing a lot of their chips. And we have the Z2 Go, which I've heard some reporting say that the Z2 Go is specific to the Legion Go S. Like that is a version of that chip that is just for those handhelds, which is, I think, very interesting, first of all. And then the Z2 and then the Z2 Extreme. But also, they have another line of chips that are for laptops specifically. And those are, the Strix Point, and they introduced the Strix Point Halo, or the Strix Halo, I think it's called, is the top line one. Yeah. And John and I got to see the Strix Halo going to work in the Asus ROG Z Flow, the Flow Z13.
Z13, yeah,
yes.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
Which, man, these names are brutal.
These
but anyway,
names are bad, yes.
Yeah, the Flow Z13, which is basically, it looks actually, the easiest way to describe it, it looks like a Microsoft Surface tablet in that, it's a tablet and it has a keyboard that you can take off, and then
I have the old model. I got the old model.
Right, exactly.
The weird acronym one.
The acronym one.
Right.
Yeah. So the new version of that has the Strix Halo in it. And John and I got to mess around with that, see what it looks like. And we talked about this a little bit in that video that we made, but you could put your hand over it and you could feel the heat shooting out of that fan. Like it was really
space heater.
Yeah, like firing on all cylinders. But also, it was playing Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart at a level that, on a screen that was obviously much smaller than my television in my house, felt like it was achieving something similar to what the PS5 can do. And I was sitting there looking at that like this. They're showing us what they think is the future, maybe what 2025 is going to be. This chip is the actual future. And if possible, if they can already fit it into something that is like basically screen sized, portable monitor sized.
Yeah.
Who's going to be the first manufacturer to say like, hey, we don't need to be using these Z number chips. We could just jump right to the Strix Point and the Strix Halo and throw that in a handheld. And like, obviously the power draw is going to be wild. The battery is going to like burn out real quick. But if they can find some way to throw that in, the next ROG Ally, for example, that to me feels like an actual leap in what is possible in these handhelds. And that might be another year out. Like, I think, John, to your point, that might be the thing that's a year out. The things that they're showing us now still feel a little bit like a stopgap to me. And I don't want to call it too early, but even the Legion Go 2, I'm like, I don't know if this is as big of a jump as we want it to be or as we think it'll be, but those chips in particular feel like the next thing.
Yeah. I could see a company like One X Player, for example, one of these high-end handheld manufacturers, sort of taking the laptop chip instead of the Z series chips and be like, well, we're going to put it in this thing. It's going to be giant. It's going to be like a 10-inch or 11-inch handhelds. We're going to talk about 11-inch handhelds later.
We are.
But I could see those companies like GPD or One X Player being like, it's going to cost you $1,500, but you're going to get essentially almost base level PS5 performance in a handheld, even though the battery lasts 2 hours.
Yeah, no, it was the Z13 was really impressive. I was really kind of blown away by it. It was a beautiful screen, and the fans were just screaming and blowing hot air out, but it is a really compelling, potentially, device for somebody who wants to play games and also have a tablet that can be a productivity tablet if you want to use it with Windows.
While we were in the room, this was at the AMD booth, right? That we saw this? This is at the Asus booth. Oh, actually, it was at both. Now that I'm thinking about it.
I think it was AMD.
It was at both. But I remember we were in the Asus booth in particular, and they had that, and then also a bunch of other gaming stuff. We were in like the ROG section, and I remember John turning to me and saying, "This room is really hot, and it's not because of all the people in here."
Yes.
It's just like every single computer was turned on with the highest TDP possible, blowing hot air and pushing the most pixels.
Yeah.
Like every single computer was running the Indiana Jones and the Great Circle benchmark test.
Yeah.
At
there had to have been
the highest fidelity
computers.
Possible. Yeah.
Yeah, there had to have been 40 computers in that room, and they were just all going full tilt.
Yeah, ultra graphics, 8K monitors. It was like,
oh god,
so
imagine the power consumption in that booth. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a bunch more things that we want to get to, but before we do that, I believe we need to thank our sponsor.
Yes, this week's episode of NPC is brought to you by Pika. It's just the best and easiest way to start a blog from 0 to 60 immediately. There are a lot of other places that you could go start a blog, but if you want something that is very, very, very simple, something that uses Markdown for editing, something that costs not that much money, you can head over to pika.page and sign up there and get your blog running for free if you want with up to 50 posts. But then if you pay I think it's $6 a month or $60 a year. You can have unlimited posts. You can remove the Pika branding, and you can just have a very, very, very simple, very beautiful blog with really no thought put to anything except for just getting your writing out there, which I think is the most important thing. If you head over to pika.page/NPC, you can get 20% off your first year, which makes it an even better deal. I would highly recommend it. I use it myself for wavelengths.online. It is probably the reason that I got back into writing in a big way is how easy Pika made it. So head over there. That's pika.page/NPC. That's pika.page/NPC and use NPC20 for 20% off your first year. Thank you, Pika.
Thank you, Pika.
Thanks, Pika.
So Thunderbolt 5 is happening. It's for real. There's finally movement on this front beyond Apple, which obviously added Thunderbolt 5 support in the M4 Pro and M4 Max chips for the latest computers a few months back. A couple of things that I wanna highlight. I saw a Ugreen dock, but that's mostly gonna be useful for desktop usage. Asus has done something that I was hoping they would do. So they have ditched their proprietary XG mobile connector, which as we saw with the Ally X, Asus has been going all in on USB 4, but they've gone a step beyond. So they have introduced a new XG mobile eGPU based on Thunderbolt 5, which is obviously cross-compatible with USB 4, but native Thunderbolt 5 has higher bandwidth than USB 4. They have two versions of this eGPU. I used to have an old one that I sold, thank God. I was able to sell it. I used to have a oh gosh, what was it? The 3080 Ti laptop edition. It was crazy expensive. They're doing two models. They have a $2,200 version with the RTX 5090 laptop edition, and they have a more accessible but still $1,200 version with the new 5070 Ti laptop GPU inside. Right. It weighs less than 2.2 pounds, and it's got an integrated 350 watt power supply. So all you're getting is this thing that I believe you guys have seen in person that is it's like a chunky tablet, I would say.
I was about to say, I think it's like, I'm taking the Joy-Cons off my Switch, but if you took a Switch and then put a second Switch on the back, it's about that size exactly.
Yeah, it's like the size of a small hardback book almost, I'd say. It's or maybe the thickness of two iPad Pros with a keyboard cover on them. It's not huge, and it looks, we didn't see it in action, but it was out there on the show floor.
Yeah. Speaking as a former XG Mobile owner and user, I can tell you that the worst thing about the XG Mobile used to be the short and stiff XG Mobile connector. It was it was 30 centimeters long, and you couldn't you had to play with an ROG Ally right next to the eGPU, which sort of defeats the purpose of having an eGPU if you need to be close to the eGPU itself.
Right.
With Thunderbolt 5, Not only is it now tied in terms of performance, that's when you consider the data rates, that's about a 64 gigabit per second connection. So it's much higher than the 40 gigabit per second that you get with USB 4. It's tied with Oculink, but the real benefit is that at some point, I won't say in 2025, we are going to see optical Thunderbolt 5 cables that will allow you to say, for example, I have the kink cable version of a Thunderbolt 5 cable that is 3 meters long or 5 meters or 10 meters long, and you will be able to leave this compact eGPU somewhere in your apartment and run a cable to a future Thunderbolt 5 device, which is my next point. Surprisingly, the same company, Asus, with the Flow Z13 new version that we just mentioned, they did not add Thunderbolt 5 to it. It's still USB 4.
I found that fascinating. I think it's very interesting to be releasing the eGPU with a Thunderbolt 5 connector and not be releasing anything that has... I'm even thinking... So it's worth mentioning the eGPU or the XG Mobile 2025 edition, I think is what they're calling it. Mm-hmm. It does allow for a Thunderbolt 4 connection, obviously at much lower bandwidth. Like, it's not going to work as well as if you're using a Thunderbolt 5 connector. But you can buy it and it will be useful. I think in a lot of ways, it feels like they built it with Thunderbolt 5 to future-proof it a little bit because, this is like, John and I we sat in a big arena and we watched the release of the 50 series of NVIDIA graphics cards, right? Like, that is the new thing, and it will be the new thing for the next couple of years. It will be impossibly hard to find some of them, I'm sure, and they will be like the top of the line for a while. And in that way, Asus releasing this thing saying, we're putting the best graphics card you can have in here, and on top of that, it has Thunderbolt 5, and it's also a dock, which I think is worth mentioning as well. Like, you can be using it instead of a CalDigit dock, for example. It is technically one of the first Thunderbolt 5 docks we've seen, alongside being the first Thunderbolt 5 eGPU we've seen. It feels like as close to future-proofing as you can get in computer parts, That's basically an impossibility in the world of building your own PCs or gaming PCs or whatever, but this feels like as close as you can get to it.
And I mean, even if you buy an ROG Ally X, which has USB 4, you're still going to reap the benefits of using a 5090 laptop version via USB 4. It would obviously be better with Thunderbolt 5, but you're still having access to DLSS 4, for example, and multi-frame generation, which is one of the new features of the 50 series. So it's still going to be useful. But at this point, given how things have evolved, we always have these dream devices and these standards, and the standards keep changing. When the baseline changes, now we have USB 4 as a baseline and something like, a 7-inch display. Some of them are OLED, some of them are not. But now we're raising the standard and we're saying, well, the dream now is a handheld with Thunderbolt 5. So that you will be able to have Thunderbolt 5 eGPUs. And that will happen at some point. But I wouldn't be surprised if, Thunderbolt 5 in handhelds, considering that you're still going to You're going to have to put a Thunderbolt 5 controller inside a smaller body. Maybe that's more of a 2026 thing at this point.
And this is why I keep... True. Yeah, this is just why I keep coming back to... I think I went to CES this year anticipating I was going to see the future generation of handhelds in some ways. Like 2025 was going to be the year. And seeing things like Thunderbolt 5 support roll out, but not in any handhelds, and seeing the Z2 Extreme kind of maybe being better than what we have currently, but also maybe not, and then seeing the Strix Halo running in the Z13, it was like, oh, we're like just one more year out, and I really think it's 2026 that's going to have like the handheld that has Thunderbolt 5, the handheld that has the much better processor built in, the handheld that has a much better, battery, et cetera, et cetera. I think we're like really close. I don't think that this is the year, realistically.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I mean, I think what we saw were the first inklings and hints of what is to come, as you said, Federico. That's where we're heading. It's pretty clear what the roadmap is, but it is going to take a while, and it all comes down to things like the size of the components, the heat generated, the battery draw. All of those things have to be optimized to really make those ideal handhelds come into existence and work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's going to be a little while yet. It's going to be a little bit while yet. But the Thunderbolt 5, I think, is super interesting, and we're definitely seeing that on the more of the computer side. With there are a whole bunch of docks now: Kensington, Ugreen, OWC. There are a bunch of manufacturers making those.
Speaking
the SSD
of OWC,
drives are coming. What?
I need to bring something to the show. I don't know if you've seen this, Brendon. OWC, they have announced a series of USB 4 cables.
Yes.
And I saw the article on The Verge, and I saw the photo, and I immediately recognized, that's a rebranded King Cable.
Yes.
So OWC has, I'm fairly certain, they must have OEM'd, they have commissioned the folks at King Cable to make USB 4 cables for them, and they're gonna sell shorter versions at a higher price because, of course, you're getting the OWC brand, but it's literally from the photos. Same nylon braided material, same color, same connector, same shape of the connector, same colors, except there's no King Cable logo. There's an OWC logo. So
it's all fiber based, right?
All fiber based USB 4. Excellent cables, but I have the OG. I have the King Cable, and it goes straight to the source.
Drink straight from baby.
Definitely.
Drink from the tap, right there, the King Cable tap.
One thing that you guys didn't see, or that Brendon wasn't in Vegas for this, was the MSI booth, and the 50 series of GPUs really is front and center. When I walked into the MSI booth, there were probably 15 different versions of that graphics card on display right when you walked in. It was even promoted more heavily than the OLED displays that they're putting out now. And so there were all sorts of varieties for every level of 50 series chip. Some of them there was even a water cooled version of one of them. It was they're definitely all in on the 50 series.
Yeah,
interesting.
I'm not gonna get it for reasons that will be more clear with the next topic. But the 5090 Founders Edition, like the NVIDIA made version, like it's impossibly small. They have made the 5090 a 2-slot GPU.
Yep.
Despite all the incredible hardware they put in it, like the Blackwell chip that it comes with, the how many 21,000 CUDA cores, like it's the 32 gigs of DDR7 RAM, like incredible GPU in a 2-slot device. The Verge has an article showing how just compact it is, but I'm not gonna get it. And in fact, I'm thinking about selling my eGPU. We're gonna talk about this at some point over the next few weeks.
Interesting.
I want to talk about SteamOS. We need to talk about SteamOS. So a couple of things have happened. The first one, the highly anticipated and widely rumored and leaked, not the Nintendo Switch 2, it's the Legion Go S. It's real, and it comes in 2 versions. The Legion Go S is a less expensive version of the Legion Go with non-detachable controllers that comes with a version that costs you $800 and it runs Windows. And at some point in May, there'll be a version at $499 that runs official SteamOS out of the box. Valve has teamed up with Lenovo to make the Lenovo Legion Go S running SteamOS the same version as said by Valve in a press release, the same version of SteamOS that runs on the Steam Deck, optimized for the Legion Go S. In addition to this announcement, and you guys have seen the Legion Go S in person, I believe, so we can talk about that. In addition, Valve has said that, and we mentioned this on the show before. It was that they had pre-announced that they were going to do this in 2025. Now they have confirmed, and they've given us a timeline. They are going to release beta versions of SteamOS at some point in late March to early April for everybody to download and install on compatible hardware. And it sounds like the ROG Ally, the Ally X, and possibly the first-gen Legion Go will be supported with built-in drivers. So SteamOS on third-party hardware is going to be a thing in 2025. And we have the first official handheld launching in about 4 months, running SteamOS out of the box.
There's so much to talk about here. There's so much to talk about here.
There really is.
The first question that pops into my head is, does Valve ever make a Steam Deck 2, first of all? Mm-hmm. Do they even broach that topic? Or do they say, we hand this over to you? Like, we have SteamOS. Now we're going to maintain SteamOS. It's up to you to make the hardware. Like, you can go make your billions making the hardware. And we'll make the billions on the software side. But also, the thing about the Legion Go S, honestly, having messed around with it, held it, looked at the specs, looked at the price, the Steam version specifically, not the Windows version.
Yeah.
It is, what is it, $500, right?
Yeah. Right.
$499. And that, and specs-wise, puts it just about better in terms of price to performance than the base Steam Deck that exists in the Steam Deck lineup right now, right? There's the base Steam Deck, which is the LCD screen, and then one step up from that is the OLED model, and then one step up from that is the OLED with, I think, 1 terabyte of storage in there. Yeah. And the Legion Go S sits pretty firmly right between that LCD model and that base version of the OLED model. And I think that that's interesting for, people who are specifically walking into Best Buy and buying a gaming handheld, right? Like, if you're walking into Best Buy and you just want to walk out with a gaming handheld, right now your options at Best Buy are the ROG Ally X, and it will be the Legion Go S. In both the Windows version at a certain point and the Steam version. Both will be at Best Buy. And when I think about that, I think it's really interesting, first of all, to have a Steam-based handheld available at big box stores like that. I think that rocks. Yep. And I think it's going to be even more interesting when people who walk in, like not knowing that much, say, this one is $100 cheaper than this one. And the only reason that is because licensing Windows is more expensive. Like, that's it. That's the only difference between those two things. Because for the most part, Proton can handle pretty much anything. Like, obviously it can't. But I think there's a world in which you buy the Legion Go S with SteamOS on it, and you just never have to worry about it ever again. And I think that that's kind of the dream for people walking in and buying a console, right? And I think that I walked out of CES a little bit cool on the Legion Go S. And the more I've thought about it, the more I've warmed up to it as a thing that I could recommend to people. I think, personally, for me, it's too big. The 8-inch screen, it's just too much for me in particular. I don't think it's portable enough. That's obviously my whole deal, is portability. And I think the Legion Go S is just still too large for me to buy for myself. But it is now a thing that enters the repertoire of things I would recommend to other people by the time it launches. I have a bunch of other thoughts, but I want to give it over to you, John.
Yeah. No, I think that's right, Brendon. And I think, too, that once those devices are in big box stores, there's enough familiarity in the gaming world with Steam itself that when someone looks at it side by side with the Windows version that costs more, they'll say, well, I've already got a Steam library. I've got a bunch of games in Steam. I'm gonna save myself some money and play all my games that I already have in my Steam library.
Maybe even parents that know Steam because they've been buying gift cards for their kids.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I think Valve's in a really good position to market that to just kind of a mass market at this point. And it'll be a good entry level device for that reason. Plus, it's just less fiddly than Windows. I think Microsoft is actually kind of behind the 8 ball now with these announcements. I think this is going to make it very difficult. Now, it's very interesting, despite Phil Spencer saying that we are years away from an Xbox handheld. Now Microsoft is saying that there is a Windows handheld in the works, which I'm not really sure how you square those two things, other than they're coming from two different parts of the company.
Yeah, I think it can really be boiled down to they found themselves on the back foot and had, I would imagine, a lot of press inquiry because most people seeing Valve announce, first of all, SteamOS on the Legion Go S and SteamOS launching for other handhelds, specifically Windows-based handhelds. I imagine a lot of people reached out to Microsoft and Xbox PR saying like, hey, last we heard from you, you said you were years away from getting this to work. Yeah. How's it going? Like, how are you feeling right now? So, of course, they've responded and given a bunch of quotes to press saying that there's a version of Windows that will be a more console-like experience that will be available at some point in 2025, at some point in this calendar year. And I think you're right, John. And this is the thing we talked about a lot, like while we were literally on the show floor looking at the Legion Go S, but it just feels like they missed the mark. Like they've already lost the race in some ways. And I think not only do you contend with that, but that version of Windows is still going to be Windows, and it's still going to be expensive to license. So even at the end of the day, like with the Legion Go S, you can have two equivalent handhelds, one of them with Windows, one of them with SteamOS, and the SteamOS one is always going to be $100 cheaper. Like that by itself is one of the biggest hurdles they have in breaking into this market and making it work for them. I think that they had a good run at it. I think it's been going well so far. Obviously, the ROG Ally and the Legion Go S are both great handhelds. People love the MSI Claw from what I've seen, or the newest version of the MSI Claw from what I've seen. But as soon as Asus comes out with a version of the ROG Ally, either X or 2 or 2X or 2S or whatever they come out with that has SteamOS on it, that's going to be the thing I recommend to people from now on. And I think that's the thing a lot of people like us who are in a space where we have, a little bit of a platform to say, like, this is the thing you should probably buy. It'll make a lot more sense to buy a SteamOS handheld. And on top of that, if you have a Windows license already, you could also dual boot and put Windows on the thing yourself, right? Like the Legion Go S is a perfect example of that. One of the things for me going into CES, which I really want to talk about a lot more in the next episode, but we won't have time for this one, is I bought the ROG Ally X during the holiday break. And I immediately swapped out the hard drive. I got a 2 terabyte hard drive, and I threw the 2 terabyte in there. I took, 1.5 of those terabytes and threw Bazite on it. And the other 500 gigs are just for Windows, and literally for like 2 Windows games and the ability to boot into it so I can update the drivers. Like that's the only reason I'm using Windows at all. But the experience of using the Ally X with Bazite, which is basically just SteamOS, but like an open source community run version of it, made me see that the future of these things really at the end of the day is going to be SteamOS, unless Microsoft can come up with something quickly. And even then, I think you run into the price differential.
Yeah.
And
they've said now they're. It sounds like from what they're saying that they're actually more thinking about bringing the Xbox operating system to a handheld rather than vanilla, like an optimized version of Windows, which makes sense because like I think Microsoft is now under pressure, like you were saying, Brendon. Like Valve is actually like they have the juice, they have the momentum. They're doing this now. They're doing this in 2 months with the beta version, and they're doing this in 4 months with the first product you can buy. And Microsoft is now under pressure, and I think they must have realized there's just no way that we can take Windows and put it in a product that supports sleep and resume and suspend and great battery life.
Right.
There's no way that we can do it in 12 months. So why don't we take the Xbox OS instead, which supports all of those features and even more, like multi-game switching, for example, and actually shrunk it down to a handheld. I think it makes more sense. I wouldn't put it past Microsoft to actually show off this handheld with a teaser at some point this year, saying this is coming in 2026.
Yeah. And on top of that, to have Microsoft, it's got to hurt if you're Microsoft and one of your biggest partners, Lenovo, is putting out a SteamOS device right now. Yeah. And that device is nice. We didn't get to play Steam games on it.
I'm so excited. about that.
But even though I know the screen's a little big for you, Brendon, but holding it's a lot more comfortable, I think, than the original Legion Go. It's less angular. It's more rounded on the grips. And the screen looked fantastic, as which you would expect from Legion Go, because the original Legion Go had a fantastic screen too.
I will also say, just as a teaser for much further out, and they didn't give a date or anything for this, but we did get to pick up the prototype of the Legion Go 2 and mess around with it very briefly. I was much more interested in the Legion Go S, so that's what I focused my time on. But the Legion Go 2 also, the roundness of it, they kind of removed a lot of the angularity of that design. And that by itself made it a lot more comfortable to hold. Comfortable enough where I picked it up and I didn't realize it was the Legion Go 2 initially. I was like, oh, it's interesting that they just have the Legion Go 1 by comparison next to this. Then I picked it up and I was like, this feels way better than Legion Go. And then I looked down at the little card. I was like, oh, this is the 2. And that's why. But yeah, I think Lenovo has really figured out ergonomics in a big way between just that first release and what they have coming out in 2025, which I think is is great, because that was my biggest problem with the Legion Go.
Yeah. I really hope that I can put a SteamOS beta on my Legion Go 1 when the beta launches.
Yeah, me too.
In a couple of months. My heavily modded Legion Go 1 with the little
honestly,
with the cage. Yeah.
Put Bazite on there now and get a little preview of it. And then when SteamOS comes out for real, just wipe Bazite, put SteamOS on it, and then just use that from now on.
I think I'm going to do it with the SharePoint, the Genki SharePoint thing that I got. I'm going to put Bazite on that and be able to dual boot without messing around with the Legion Go too much, which would be nice.
Yeah. So obviously, looking ahead at the next few months on NPC, I think SteamOS is going to be one of the topics of the year for sure.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
I think so too.
I am excited for. We talked about this, but I'm excited for the first one of these manufacturers to decide to put SteamOS on a desktop or some kind of like home console that plugs into your TV. The first
if Valve doesn't do it first,
if Valve,
somebody's going to do it. Yeah,
somebody's going to do it. Like
truly,
PC, yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, even like, what if I took Bazite and put it on my B-Link? You know, I have a B-Link PC.
Some people do that. I've seen posts on Reddit. Yeah, some people do that.
It just feels like I could do that now, you know?
Yeah. We were looking at the NUCs from Asus, and they have some really powerful new NUCs available, and that would be perfect for this kind of thing.
Yes, exactly.
Speaking of Lenovo, I wanted to bring your guys' attention to this 8.8 inch gaming tablet that they are releasing. It's called the Legion Tab. It's got Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 inside. And it may seem familiar because it's the global version of the same tablet that was released in multiple over the past couple of years, actually, in China only. In China, the same tablet is called the Lenovo Y700. I don't know why it's called that, but they have versions from 2022, 2023, and 2024. When I saw this announcement at CES, I started laughing because just a week ago, I got the Chinese version.
Of course,
that's so funny.
Did.
Yeah,
in
so
white.
I love that.
In white, obviously.
Oh, look how tiny it is.
Yeah, it's so comfortable. It's like
really nice.
I actually really love it. So the reason why I wanted to mention this link and show off this thing, I want to talk about it in the next episode. Over my holiday break, I've been doing research about the what is the best way beyond a Nintendo 3DS to play and to emulate DS and 3DS games. So this has been my quest over the holidays. Like, I want to play. I'm actually almost finished with Super Mario 3D Land again.
Oh, nice!
Incredible game.
Incredible game. Yeah.
But I wanted to, I've done my research. I was like, okay, what are the best ways, except for original hardware, to emulate DS and 3DS? And I posted a teaser of me using my old Surface Duo 2, which is a product from like 3 years ago that's been discontinued. Microsoft is not making it anymore, but it's a foldable with 2 screens. And that comes with its own limitations, like Android 13, for example, and obviously doesn't have the same power of a modern Snapdragon system. But this one, I thought, well, this looks like a very comfortable tablet, and I can tell you that it is. But it's got 2 interesting things. The first one is Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. Obviously, it's a powerhouse. You can emulate with Citra. You can play 3DS at like 4 times the resolution, and it absolutely doesn't care.
Wow.
But in portrait, it's quite comfortable to have 1 screen here and 1 screen up above for DS and 3DS.
Yeah.
And lastly, not only does it have a USB port here in landscape, but it has a USB port here in portrait.
Oh,
so
beautiful.
What I can do is pair with the GameSir X2S, which I believe is the only controller that, the only telescopic controller that has a USB connector on the left side of the controller.
Yes.
So
it is, I think.
I will bring this to the next episode. So being able to emulate 3DS games on this thing with like 4 times the resolution. I've been playing A Link Between Worlds, which, Brendon, obviously, is one of your favorite Zeldas.
It sure is.
I've been playing that at 4x resolution with a 4K texture pack. Oof, like it's been a dream. So I want to do some comparisons between like using an iPhone, using a Steam Deck, using a Lenovo. It's not the Legion Tab. It's the Chinese version, the Y700, and the Surface Duo.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool.
Sounds good.
So that's otherwise, I mean, it's pretty nice tablet. The final thing that I wanted to mention on the show, I wanted to save this for last. How do you guys feel about an 11-inch handheld?
It's a whole new meaning to NPC. It's not portable console. Yeah.
Yes.
Next power lift console. Like, it's so Acer. The folks at Acer, they're doing 2 new handhelds. The Nitro. My brain.
The Nitro Blaze.
The Nitro Blaze 8, which I keep trying to say as the Nitro Blaze It, but it's not the Nitro Blaze It. It's the Nitro Blaze 8.
Yes.
And the incredibly large Nitro Blaze 11. Now, if it weren't for the fact that it's running Windows, I gotta be honest with you guys, I'm kind of into that. Like, I don't know what is it about the photo of the guy using the Nitro Blaze 11.
Yeah, they couldn't even hide it in their product photography. How big this thing is. It's like he's holding like a cafeteria tray.
It's. I don't know what is it about. Maybe it's the perspective of the photo. But when you think about it, like 11 inches, like I have an 11-inch iPad Pro. The 11-inch iPad Pro is not that large. Like when I hold the 11-inch, I don't know. Is it the controllers? Is it the bezels around the display? It looks like the guy's holding like a 20-inch tablet. But still,
yes,
I gotta be honest. A version of the Nitro Blaze 11 with SteamOS. I wouldn't hate it.
That works for you? Yeah, okay.
I would do it.
It's too. Yes, you would. I believe you 100%, Federico. It's too much for me. I think it's a combination of a bunch of things. Yeah. Yes, the iPad Pro is not too big at 11 inches, but it's also one of the thinnest tablets on the market. This thing is both thick and it has all the controllers and the big bezel around it. It's too much, I think. I really do think it's too much.
Yeah. They do have an 8-inch version, and then there also is the Nitro Blaze 7, which I think was out already. But in general, even down to the branding, and I don't want to be too mean, but like it just seems like Acer has kind of lost the plot on what people want out of it. Like when I think of product market fit for the Nitro series of handhelds that Acer has, I feel like they'd be much better off with either the Legion Go or the Ally. Yeah. But hey, none of those companies are making an 11-inch handheld, so I guess there's somebody out there. They're the Federicos of the world who want something like that.
Some people are into that. So,
but what if it was vertical? What if you could put the
now that would be an interesting DS.
Sideways,
you get 5.5 inches of DS displays. At the same time.
Maybe that's the answer.
Maybe that's the Nintendo Switch 2, actually. Which, by the way, let's just wrap it up this way. We still don't know if the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be announced
as of this recording, we should say, because who knows by the time this episode comes out. But like we're careening closer and closer to it.
You guys have held Nintendo Switch 2 accessories.
Yeah, we did.
Yes, we have. Prototypes.
It was like the first thing we did when we hit the show floor was, we went to a booth and they handed us some Switch 2 accessories. This has gone so far that Nintendo actually finally acknowledged this yesterday in a press release, saying that all of the images that exist online are not official. And that's
of course.
That's all they said.
That's as much as they've said, which I love. So funny.
Way. I thought they were.
Yeah.
The most non-statement statement ever.
But I mean, for all intents and purposes, we have seen what this thing looks like. We have a pretty good understanding of what it's going to look like. And at least as of last night, Federico, you shared with us a link where somebody seems to have figured out some of the launch software as well, which I think is very interesting.
Red Dead Redemption 2?
Red Dead Redemption 2, which I'll just, the asterisk on that is like, I have been asking for like 2 years, what is the game that feels like, oh, I can't believe Skyrim is running on the Switch? Yeah. And I think it's Red Dead Redemption 2.
I can see that. I could see that. Yeah.
That's the one where it's like, wow, I can have that in a thing that size, that is that thin.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I think we're going to have a busy next few months, both in emulation land, and Bernick, we're gonna talk about you guys soon.
We will. We won't leave you out. We won't leave you out of this. I think we have more to talk about CES too coming up in future episodes. I mean, Brendon and I saw a very cool prototype controller that we both wrote about on Mac Stories and on wavelengths.online. So we've got that. We've also got Razer is doing some interesting things, which I was very surprised at when we walked into their booth. So we've got some more things to cover in future episodes there too.
And then also, finally, I know you ordered it, Federico, and I ordered 2 of them, but the Miu Flip is like shipping.
It's shipping.
It's on the way.
So I'm waiting for the Flip, and I'm waiting for the Odin Portal. So that's also
same. Yeah.
Same here.
Things coming. Over the
Portal
next
for
few
me,
weeks.
no Miu Flip for me at this point. But you know what? We haven't even mentioned too, Federico, is we saw the MCon controller too, behind glass. But all 3 of us have pre-ordered one through we've all supported the Kickstarter campaign. So that's not coming for many months, but it was really interesting to see it in person and talk to some of the people at OSNAP, because the thing looks really polished. I mean, we did not put our hands on it, but it still looked like a real product, more than I expected, really.
Nice.
I saw a thing that I can't confirm that I'm very interested in that said that Sony actually has a patent on the idea of flipping a screen up to reveal controls that expires sometime in the early summer, like June or July.
Okay.
And the MCon is currently slated for August, which I think is I think they're just waiting out that patent, hypothetically. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
All right. Well,
I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Well, John, take us home.
All right. Well, that's it for this week, everybody. You can find us online. Go to wavelengths.online to follow Brendon Bigley. You can find him on social media. You can also find him doing Into the Aether, his video game podcast. Federico and I are over at macstories.net, and we do a bunch of other stuff like Club Mac Stories, App Stories, and a bunch of other projects. That's it for today, folks. We will see you in a couple of weeks. Bye, guys.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.